الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
So we're really big on community here at the IC. We want you to get to know each other, and not just based off of what you do professionally or what you're going to study or these kinds of things. And we want you to also not have to identify yourself beyond anything other than your name. And names are really interesting, especially when we're going to talk about spirituality tonight. Because a lot of you in this room are going to have choices and options that you can engage in throughout your time in New York, in this dunya. And the entry point of being able to have not just a relationship with the story behind your name, but a certain pride in your name. The state of the heart can be evidenced through the decisions that we make and how it is that we engage all of creation around us, but also how we engage ourselves. And why this is relevant is because you'll be able to choose many different ways in which you determine how the world relates to you, with something as simple perhaps as to what you're willing to let people do in regards to how they even just pronounce your name or mispronounce your name. And my suggestion would be, for no other reason other than the sake of your heart, don't let somebody tell you that your name is something other than what it actually is. You don't have to allow for yourself to believe that the only people whose names should be pronounced in the ways that it was intended, or we can channel back to the one who gave you your name, wasn't so that somebody would call you something other than what it is that you're actually meant to be called. Does that make sense? And this is where we can understand this from a spiritual standpoint, because when the heart is sovereign over the body versus the nafs being in a state of control, the lower self, you're not going to be in a place where you're going to let somebody call you something other than what you're intended to be called. My name is Khalid, and growing up, people butchered my name in all different kinds of ways. Khalid, Colin, I don't even know what. And every time that happens, what is being missed is not some weird understanding or skewed interpretation of representing Islam. You don't have to represent anything other than yourself. You don't have to bear the burden of being now the representative of 2 billion people in the world. You get to just be you, but what it does is you are subconsciously telling yourself that it's okay for someone to believe that I am from elsewhere, or that where I'm at does not belong here. It shouldn't be as hard as pronouncing your name as it would be to pronounce Robert, as it is to pronounce Jennifer. And some of you might be named those things. That's totally fine, because to have a Muslim name is to not have an Arabic name. And it goes in every direction. Because some of you change your name not for those who are not Muslim, but for those who are Muslim. And so Fatu doesn't have to suddenly become Fatima or something like that, because there's brown Muslims who have never met a Fatu before. She can just be Fatu. Do you understand? And if every day she tells herself that I can't be, or Aisatu has to suddenly become Aisha, but that's not her name. Just like your name is Hassan and Ahmed and Muhammad, it doesn't have to be something other than that. Do you see what I mean? And do you see its connection to your heart? Because in every single moment it happens, sometimes you'll be like, that's fine. And sometimes you might cringe. Why can't you just let me be me? You have to let yourself be you. We talk about spirituality, it's a word, and words have definitions to them. In Islam as a religious tradition, there's a definition to it as well that we'll get into. But one of the things I like to do in our halakas is get to a place where we're also hearing and learning from each other. So there's dimensional understanding to Islam. It's not just practice and pillars, which are there, but a lot of you, when you have been given Islam, all you've been given is black and white, right and wrong, mechanics, rituals, practice, if anything. A lot of you have probably learned the words fard and haram before anyone taught you who God is or how to celebrate the divine in your life. You were told to pray your sunnahs before you were taught who sunnah it actually was that you were following. And from the prism of spirituality, it wasn't even a dimension that was given to you, because the focus was just on, here's how to do Islam. But there's so much more that comes into it. Our religion gives us definitely something to do. There's pillars of practice. There's a foundational tradition that's called the Hadith Jibreel, where the angel Gabriel comes and speaks to the Prophet ﷺ, asks him different questions. What is Islam? What is Iman? What is Ihsan? Tell me of the hour. And so when he asks him what is Islam, he tells him the foundational practices: Shahada, prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, zakat, charity. What is Iman? The articles of faith, to believe in God, His angels, His books, His messengers, the last day, and predestination, the good and bad of it. What is Ihsan? He says, أَن تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. That you worship God as if you can see Him, for although you cannot see Him, He sees you. And he says, tell me of the hour. And the Prophet says, the one who is asking knows as much as the one that's being asked. But when you think about it in terms of dimensions, there's Islam, so this religion gives you something to do. There's Iman, this religion gives you something to believe in. There's Ihsan, this religion gives you something to embody. And there is the last day, an afterlife. This religion gives you something to get ready for. It's not just the mechanics of prayer or black and white. The religion is not an inherited religion. You cannot be Muslim just because your parents are Muslim. It's a discursive theology. You have to be able to explain, why are you Muslim? Why do you believe in one God? Why do you believe the Quran is the word of God? And in this community, what we try to focus on is what Allah invites you to on every page of the Quran, which is to think, to reflect, to contemplate, to be able to build a deeper connection with your faith that isn't just about the black and white, the right and wrong, because the ritual is seen as not an ends, but a means to something. Does that make sense? So in the scope of now spirituality, we're going to get into it a little bit more, but I'd love for you to turn to the person next to you. Again, introduce yourselves if you didn't already, and learn people's names, and maybe bring someone else into the circle as well. Ideally in pairs, but no more than 3 if possible, so everybody gets to talk. A lot of you, no one has ever asked you what you think before when it comes to religion. You don't want to only speak because you feel like you have the best thing or right thing to say, nor do you want to hesitate because you're worried you might say the wrong thing. Just talk and share your ideas. That's how we grow, and that's how we benefit from one another. When somebody's speaking, your role is to just listen. You don't have to jump to remedy or correct. It's a sign of spiritual immaturity to believe you know every opinion on every matter. That's just not going to work, especially in a diverse space like this. You're going to meet a lot of Muslims who their Islam doesn't look anything like your Islam, but it's still rooted in what this religion is about. So I'd like for you to turn to the people next to you. What does this word spirituality even mean? If we were to give it a definition, what would we say? Because you know the meanings of things through the names of things. And this is Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, that Adam was taught the names of everything. So if I said microphone to you, we have a common definition. If I said live stream to you, we have a common definition. If I say Zoom to you, it's not even what the word Zoom actually means. You all know what I'm talking about when we say Zoom. But if I say words like compassion to you, if I say words like integrity to you, if I say words like forgiveness or love to you, if even I say the word God to you, we all wouldn't necessarily have a baseline definition that's as concrete as these words that we know. So we want to be able to extrapolate more meaning from things by learning the definitions of things as we attach these words to our lexicon. So if you turn to the person next to you, what does this word spirituality mean? If we have a conversation about that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so let's come back. Shh. So what does this word mean? What did you discuss? Because you can't seek to attain something or harness something if you don't have a direction towards it. If you don't know what it is, it doesn't mean that you don't need it. But if there's ambiguity, it'll be a problem, right? If I said, go over there, and then got mad at you because you went someplace other than where I wanted you to, he was like, well, you just said go there, but didn't give definition to it, right? You can't engage this religion just with a Sunday school knowledge of it, or only have an experience with it up until a certain point in time, because the spaces many of you frequent, whether they're classrooms, offices, or a combination thereof, they're built off of an idea of secularism that isn't about no mention of God in those spaces. But the secularism that it adopts is one that says, this is all that there is. There's nothing after this. So the only mode of success you have is one of worldly acquisition. But our religious tradition is very different. And it necessitates, as we have growth in our life, like you don't eat the same food as when you were 2 years old. You don't wear the same clothes as when you were a baby. You have physical growth and maturation that happens organically. Just as you have emotional capacity that changes, your mental capacity matures also on an organic level. Spiritual maturity needs a little bit more deliberate attention towards it. And you can't have attentiveness towards something that you don't even know what it means or haven't thought about for yourself. Well, what is the point of this, or what is its definition? So what did we discuss? What does this word spirituality mean? Do you want to say something, Sam? Did you raise your hand?
No, I didn't.
Well, there you go. Go ahead.
We were just discussing this beings of the spirit or of the soul, so living not in a material or relational world. And then we discussed a little bit about whether spirituality was kind of like I don't know, like a hipster term versus like his religion. He said that all the religion for spirituality goes wrong and encompassing, and it doesn't define where you're at with that spirituality. So, wondering if it's just really a term that I don't know, people I don't know if take seriously.
Okay, great. What else? Yeah.
We connect the idea of like how humans have different forms of desire, and how we also have like to satisfy our soul. So for spirituality is also satisfying your soul's desire and what the soul craves. And another way we find that is not just by practice of your specific religion, but of the specific of being God conscious and having those having God on your mind constantly, and being conscious of your deeds, your actions, and in correlation to like a moral code that God gives us.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
To me, spirituality is a way of life, and it's about connecting with God. At the same time, I believe it's a way of love, and to find God in everywhere and with everything.
Someone else had their hand. Yeah.
It's like having a deep connection with God, and how you contemplate the little things in life, how they are connected, and like everything is connected with God, and how we are like everything is just predestined, and we spend our lives according to it. It's not just about like the regular things, for example, praying or something. We look at the smaller and the intricate details of life, and we connect it with God.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you help clarify why we're here, the definition of this life? And I think it offers an explanation to things that are not existing in other dimensions that we cannot see or feel, but it is there.
Anyone else? Yeah.
In my group, somebody said matters of the heart, and that was a perfect connection to what another person said, which was like your connection to Allah, and that kind of connected with what I was saying with like the unseen, because like you can't really see your connection with Allah, like you can feel it, but you can't see it. So that's kind of like more connecting to your spirituality that's not seen.
So everything sounds great, right? But do you see how also all of it doesn't necessarily sound the same? And this is a problem. Not because any of you have a problem, but how is it that in the collective space, probably the youngest person in the room has lived for 17 or 18 years? Yet we don't have a common baseline definition that's just simple around something that is a foundational dimension of this religion. Do you get what I mean? In our community, we get a lot of people who come to this religion at a later stage in their life, whether they were born into it or they convert into it. But you start to build a relationship with parts of this tradition that go deeper than just, is this permissible, is this impermissible? And it makes you walk on eggshells. If we were to give a definition of spirituality from an Islamic standpoint, it's the ability to take meaning from the environment around you. Does that make sense? How you see things doesn't just tell you about what it is that you're looking at, but how you see things tells you a lot about what's going on within yourself. The word that quite often gets associated with spirituality as a science in Islam is the word ihsan. It has the etymological root of hasana, which denotes beauty. But it's the ability to perceive beauty through primarily your perspective, your vision. So I'll give you an example anecdotally. We went for Hajj in 2019 before the last Hajj before COVID hit. And I don't know if any of you went on Hajj that year, you have family members that went on Hajj that year. Hajj is one of the mandatory pillars of Islam that once in your lifetime, if you have the means to do so, after you've reached adulthood, which is being post-pubescent from a Sharia standpoint, you take this pilgrimage in the month of Dhul Hijjah that is within the traditions of the Prophet Abraham and his family, peace be upon all of them. And in Islam as a tradition, when it rains, it's said to be a very blessed time, a time to make dua, to supplicate to God. And in that year in Hajj, it rained everywhere. It rained in Mecca, it rained in Medina, it rained in Mina, the tent city that you stay in during the Hajj pilgrimage. And it even rained on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the day that's known as the day of Arafah. That the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says about this day in relation to Hajj, Al-Hajju Arafah, that Hajj is Arafah. That if you don't stand at Arafah, your Hajj is not complete. It's a really important day on the Islamic calendar, arguably the most auspicious day on the Islamic calendar in its totality. And it rained on the day of Arafah in 2019 when we were on Hajj. There was millions of us on the plain of Arafah, all dressed in the images that you've seen of people on Hajj. There's a lot of commotion and a lot of noise, and as soon as the rain started to fall, there was just complete silence. And everybody turned in the direction of the Kaaba, because nobody wanted to miss out on that opportunity of blessing. And it felt like with every drop of rain that was hitting the roof of every tent, Allah was accepting another dua, and another dua, and another dua. When it was all wrapped up, there was a young man that was in our group that said to me, I'm going to go refreshen my wudu. And I said, I'll come with you. And when we walked to the place where we made wudu and we came back, there was an elderly man, as old as your grandfather, if you want to picture your grandfather in your head. And he had also made his wudu. He was standing by a tree. And to dry off, he had not only removed the top part of his ihram, the two unstitched white pieces of cloth that he was wearing, but he also removed the bottom part of it. This old man was standing on the plain of Arafah wearing nothing. There wasn't millions of people surrounding him, it's not feasible, but there was definitely hundreds, if not more. Some were looking at him really disgusted. Some were pointing and laughing. Some were getting angry at the people that were laughing. Some were just staring and saying nothing. And the young man that was standing with me said to me, you take off the top of your ihram, I'm going to take off the top of mine. Let's go give him some privacy. And I turned and faced towards the Kaaba and made dua to Allah and said, Ya Allah, give me a heart that is like the heart of this person. There's literally hundreds of people seeing this man. They are in ihram on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, the day of Arafah, that they just experienced in the rain. They're all seeing something, but one person sees it differently. This is what ihsan is about. You can gauge the state of your heart by looking at your choices and your decisions and understanding how it is that you see what's in front of you. Some of you are going to see Jummah as a distraction, and you are going to see your exam as being more important than attending the Friday prayer. Some of you will walk in a room and you will only talk to people who have the same color of skin as you do. And you have grown up in homes where the faces that are sitting at a dinner table with you looking across the table only match you in country of origin. You will only greet people that have external similarities. And some of you are going to not connect at the level of shared externals, shared race, shared ethnicity, shared class, but you will connect at the level of shared internals, shared values, shared ethics, shared hearts. This is the difference between what is outward, Islam, and what is inward, Iman, and what is a combination of both, Ihsan. And this is why we make dua that, Ya Allah, make us from the muhsineen, those who are able to have both outward and inward vision, and able to ascertain beauty that impacts choices. Would you rather be the person that stood and did nothing? Would you rather be the person who pointed and laughed? Would you rather be the person that got disgusted, either with the elderly man or with the people that were pointing fingers at the elderly man? Or would you want to be the person who saw it and saw the role that they play within remedying the situation with real wisdom and compassion? My dua for you is that you're like the one person in the sea of masses. That's why Islam isn't a sociological identity variable. That's why it's not an inherited religion. That's why you have to want it in order to be able to see the world in that way. Does that make sense? I want to read to you something that I wrote some time ago that illustrates it a little bit differently as well. And pay attention, because I'm going to ask you all to discuss with the people around you what this brings up for you in terms of spirituality. I wrote this a couple of months into the pandemic in 2020, where our community had, going into those first few weeks of COVID, 100 people who had either passed away directly or lost loved ones before we stopped counting. New York City was a big mess. We were all very sedentary in our homes. We had a lot of people that were going through it during COVID. And so I decided in some of those nights, as we were virtual in every which way you can imagine, to also write about something that I called spiritual poverty, the absence of spirituality. So as you're sitting here right now, just put your distractions out of your mind. Realize that in our theology, what it's built upon is the idea that before anything came into existence, Allah had written that all of us would be together in this moment. There's a reason why you're sitting here. And so sit not just with your body, but with your mind, with your heart, with your spirit, with yourself in its entirety. And just listen to the words, because I'm going to ask you to talk to the people around you and say, what did it bring up for you? What is it invoking within you? The word spirituality gets thrown around a lot, but its importance has yet to be recognized by most of us. The deepest poverty that is experienced by people in the West is a spiritual poverty. This is not a part of the world that people leave their homes to journey towards in order to find themselves. For that, most people still head eastward. People come here to find wealth and material gain, not meaning and purpose. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive, but when the acquisition of the former comes prior to the cultivation of the latter, we find then systems and structures like those that are built around us. Remember again, people are dying everywhere. You might live in a part of the country where everybody was able to be in their homes. In New York City, the subways were still filled to the brim, not because just essential workers were going to the hospitals, which they were, but there were many people who only get paid if they go to work that still had to expose themselves to the coronavirus so that their family would have food to eat. There were people in New York City who were reaching out to us asking for assistance because their landlords were telling them that if you don't have money to pay for your rent, you can just sleep with me. There are people who could care less what their staff was getting exposed to as they left the city to sit in some home elsewhere while somebody else was getting sick and dying. This is the context in which this is being written. So here again, most people still held eastward. People come here to find wealth and material gain, not meaning and purpose. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive, but when the acquisition of the former comes prior to the cultivation of the latter, we find then systems and structures like those that are built around us. Race and class become the determining factors of who has and who has not. Ethics and morals get put to the side. The masses sway in whichever direction the winds of the privileged blow them in. In the midst of all of it, our sense of humanity dies over and over again, for it's not possible to live without a heart. And there is no heart present where there is spiritual poverty. The counter to this is for each of us to aspire towards real richness and not the facade of it. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Laysa al-ghina an kathrat al-arad, walakin al-ghina ghina an-nafs." That true richness is not to have many possessions, but true richness is having a richness of your soul. Our list of dreams and aspirations has to first include the goal of inward contentment in order for us to then seek it out and attain it. More accurately, we probably first need a list of dreams and aspirations to begin with. May Allah make us from amongst those who are never afraid to dream. To be one who values people over profits requires a willingness to recognize what really is going on and make a commitment to live bigger than it. We are afforded the opportunity through our Islam to yield that consciousness
and an opening to love something bigger than the world and its temporary offerings. More importantly, it affords the opportunity to simply love in a very real way. The consequences of spiritual poverty are the ailments of being uncaring, indifferent, and arrogant. We're fine with people having no food to eat, no adequate system of shelter, while we send billions of dollars in weapons overseas. Our entire healthcare system, prison system, educational system, justice system, welfare system, and every system are proofs themselves of how inwardly poor we are, and it should not be something that is left as a tangent to also understand how deeply evidentiary these systems are of anti-blackness that this country is built upon. The two go hand in hand. Every system are proofs themselves of how inwardly poor we are and how deep our deficit of meaning has reached. I don't want to just be a sexual organ or a stomach or a fleeting desire. I want to live with my heart and experience life through all of my senses. To find meaning by embracing my God-given talents and skills, and to attain purpose by going out and sharing those talents and skills with others unconditionally and simply out of love and it being the right thing to do. I want to be a contributor and not just a consumer, a heart and not just a body. I want to be spiritually rich and never spiritually poor. And I hope to use my time in this world as a way to further me along that way. What I want you to do is turn to the persons next to you again. What is this bringing up for you? What does it mean to you in the prism of spirituality? And how it's not complicated in the sense that it's hard to understand, but it's not simple. It has multiple facets and in turn multiple gains and benefits to it. Because you don't just pray with a body. In this religion, you pray with your heart. You don't just pray. In this religion, you pray to God. If you have never thought who God is to you, the paradox of decision making is when you don't make a choice, you've essentially chosen. And a lot of you believe in a God that's an angry old man in the sky looking for a reason to punish you. I choose to worship a God that believes in me more than I believe in myself. A God that isn't just watching me, but watching over me. A God that loves me more than a mother loves its child. That's the God I choose to believe in with my heart every single day. Spirituality is the necessary component to start getting that mindset in its order. So we turn to the person next to you. What do these words bring up for you? What is it evoking within you in terms of thoughts and perspectives? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay. So, can we just move up a bit? If you guys can come in this way, that'd be great. The people who are also coming in to pray, they're able to have kind of a pathway. But there's a lot of room up here, so there's no reason for people to be sitting by the doors. So if you all who are sitting here can just move up, and then the people behind you can move in, that'd be great. Yeah. And if people need to make asr, you can feel free to get up and pray. The Qibla is the direction of the lines on the carpet. It's this way, towards this corner, the way these guys are praying. So what came up for people? What did you discuss? Do you have your hand raised?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but I mentioned how, at least in America, I've noticed that we have such a strong focus on the individual. And I think that takes away a lot from just thinking about, like, even though Islam is a very personal religion, it's also, like, there's a lot of beauty in being a community and having, like, a shared focus on religion. So I think that our, like, self-centered and kind of selfish mindset that we're taught is kind of, like, contradicts Islam. Like, another thing is people from Northeast New York especially, like, there's always, like, a mind your own business kind of mindset. Like, if you see something, you mentioned a story from Hajj, any New Yorker, if they ever saw something like that, they would just turn their head, like mind their own business.
I'm a New Yorker. I'm not saying to push back on you,
Yeah.
right? But I am a New Yorker, and we provided privacy to this man. Do you know? But I get what you're saying.
But like,
Keep going.
That's something that we're taught in Islam to be considered others. In like, I'm just saying.
Everybody else there was Muslim too,
Right?
right? We were only in a Muslim space, and it was all Muslims, and there was just this one guy who saw it differently. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? But keep going.
Okay. Okay. But basically, my point was that when we talk about being like spiritual, we also have to talk about just having like a cleaner heart and not being so selfish.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, right? You bring a clean heart, but it doesn't assume the absolutes only, that I'm filthy, I'm unclean. No, Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that we made humanity in the most beautiful of forms, right? You're good, but a good person can still be better. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you expose yourself to in this city that's going to make a lot of crusty stuff engulf your heart. And you want to be able to make sure that you are making time for your heart in the course of your routine. And you look at your day, your week, your month. If you don't design your life, someone else is going to design it for you. And most of these places, they want you to be egocentric. They want you to think that you are the center of everything. My kids and I were driving down the road and somebody cut us off. And in my head, I'm thinking all kinds of stuff. This guy almost killed my babies. What's wrong with him? Who drives like this? And then my children, who are in my office right now, and they're going to be in here when we pray Maghrib, they're sitting in the back seat like years ago. So they're 8 and 10 now. They're much younger at that point. My son and my daughter are saying to each other, I hope that person's okay. Maybe one of their family members is in the hospital. We should make dua that Allah is making things okay for them. My kids are some of my best teachers in spirituality. They are innocent. They see the world through a prism of innocence. Do you get what I mean? We see it through bitterness. We see it through a consumer-driven society that tells me I'm the one that everything surrounds. Interdependence is the highest level of self-actualization in Islam, not independence. It doesn't mean you can't be an individual, but it's not the rugged sense of individualism that whiteness imposes upon you. Because this is another problem. Islam is not homogeneous. The companions of the Messenger of God, they all had their own individual personalities, their own characteristics. Abu Bakr was not like Umar, who was not like Ali, who was not like Uthman. They were all very different from each other. That's not the idea, to make you just one broader kind of sweep of a brush and you're all the same. You are all different, and you should embrace what makes you different. But a rugged sense of individualism yields now through supremacy and whiteness, a modern day shirk, where I'm worshiping myself and I believe everything else is supposed to be subservient to me. It's the opposite of a God-centric religion. Do you know what I mean? And so you bring to your heart that cleanliness and be the one that gets up when everybody else is sitting down and an older person needs a space to sit on the bus or the train. Don't be the first one to eat. Be the one that's serving the food. You want to know the state of your heart? Look at the decisions that you make. Why are you always the one that finds yourself in circles of gossip? Why are you always in a place where the people that are around you are the ones that are making fun of others as ways to kind of connect? Versus, why are you the one that's visiting the people in the hospital who are sick? Or you're the one that's offering to tutor somebody who doesn't understand something? You recognize in these ways your God-given talents and how it is you're utilizing them. The idea is not to exist in a prism of negativity that says, I suck at life, but the idea is to understand what you do well and how you could do it better, and how there's areas of improvement that you can excel in. Do you see what I mean? It all is rooted in spirituality. Does that make sense? You don't want to be a good Muslim because you're good at the mechanics of Islam. You want to be a good Muslim because you're a good person, and you understand that this religion doesn't separate religion, spirituality, and ethics, it synergizes all of them. What else is coming up for people? What else did you discuss? Yeah, go ahead.
Talking about how a big problem in Islamic communities is the overall Islamic communities. We find that culture doesn't forgive the way that God forgives, and because culture doesn't forgive, people assume that that's part of the religion, and that pushes people away from Islam and from spirituality and from asking for forgiveness from God. And that's part of what pushes people away from spirituality, finding a deeper connection with God.
And I'm sorry for anybody who's done that to you. And don't do that to other people. You're going to have people that you're going to meet in this community. They're going to just be different from you. And that's okay. Anybody is entitled to be Muslim. It's not a culturally hegemonic attitude that yields proximity to the divine. But when you can find beauty in people of all backgrounds and all walks of life, and how you know your inward is centered, it's not always that I need you to be like me because I think you are bad at the way you do things. But when my identity is rooted just in externals and not internals, I need you to be like me because I don't know how to be me unless everyone around me is just like me. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had companions that were from everywhere. And they were across the prism of religiosity. People who were Persian, people who were Romans, people who were Abyssinian, African, people who were from different points of Arabia. These were all his companions. There was people who we know all of their names, and they were celebrated as excelling in their religiosity. There were companions of the Prophet who drank alcohol, who committed zina, who struggled. There's a companion, there's a hadith in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, where a man comes to the Prophet and gives him a gift of a bottle of liquor. It's in the hadith. All of these people make up the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not in a broader sense, but in the specificity of what is deemed within normative Sunni understanding to be the best generation of Islam. And they're doing these things. That's why spirituality is a critical part. We have a lot of people who come to this community wanting to learn more about Islam, to convert to Islam. We get up to 5 shahadas a week here, mashallah. We're not a proselytizing community. People just make their way here, and we support them where we can. There's a young woman who is here whose boyfriend is Muslim. They were sitting with me. His family has this cultural attitude. And she's sitting in a place where the tears are streaming from her face as she's talking about how difficult it is. And she says to both of us, I'm trying to understand this religion, and all these people are giving me is rules. Do you understand what I'm saying? And everything that they're telling her, as she is still of a different culture than they are, is not necessarily about become a part of our family and we'll support you, but here's where this doesn't check right, here's where this doesn't check right, here's where you have to let go of this. To be Muslim is to not commit a cultural apostasy. You have to be strong enough to ask yourself, why do I only associate with Muslims and people who look like me? And it's not to say that shouldn't be the case. You need sometimes to be in spaces where people just understand what your background and experience is based off of the complexity to your identity. I can never tell you what it's like to be a black person living in this country. This is why we need to have spaces where black people can come together, where we have Latino people come together, where we have our convert community come together. Because then the nuance of understanding is, I'm just exhausted from trying to teach you something that it's your business to learn, but it's not upon me to give you that knowledge. Do you see the difference there? But just relate to your Islam. I want to show you a couple of things really quick as we're going to wrap up. When we talk about a dimensional understanding of Islam, and some of you have seen me say this before, what a lot of us get is just one dimension, which is Islam in terms of practice. And that's a part of it,
But if you only have one dimension, regardless of what you're looking at, it's going to be simplistic. It's going to look like a straight line, right? That's what one dimension means. This is something that is one-dimensional. This is what most of you get, and this is what you give to people then. If somebody came in here and took their shahada right now and said to you, teach me about Islam, what a lot of you will give them is just practice and mechanics, do's and don'ts. It's not that it's not a part of it, but it's not absolute. And then most of us, we don't even have all of it. If I asked you to teach me about the rules of Hajj, could you tell me what it is? You don't have to know it until you go to it, and you need to know it at that point. If I told you, explain to me the intricacies of zakat, could you tell me those things? So even what we have isn't necessarily complete, but this is what most of us have, and this is what we give, right? Somebody's going to convert, and you're going to say, you can't have a dog, music is this, and that's and that. You're giving them sound bites. Where is God in all of this? Where is what makes this religion deep and beautiful? And so what happens is that we added a second dimension, what is called iman, or theology. When you go from one dimension to two dimensions, the straight line now has shape to it. So it goes from something simplistic to something you can draw more meaning from. If I told you to describe this to me, or you see the world one-dimensionally, then you can't see somebody bigger than how they dress or how they don't dress. You can't see somebody bigger than the color of their skin or the wealth that they possess, the logos on their clothes, right? This is how most of the world sees the rest of the world. When you add a second dimension to it, you can now understand more. Doesn't this look like it gives you more meaning than just this? What our religion then does is it adds a third prism, which is called ihsan. And this is what is going to give you volume, right? You see this, and I see it. And none of us sees it the way that anybody else sees it. Which means, also, that none of us sees it better or worse, we just see it different. And you can see this on 360 degrees of perspective on almost an infinite number of planes. This is what brings volume and depth. This is what allows for you to see things with beauty. And the Prophet ﷺ, this is why he could connect to people and also had an inward state of contentment. You don't want to be anxious. You don't want to be stressed. You don't want to be miserable. It's a heart that doesn't feel good, that gets angry all the time. And then a world that doesn't have a heart, that confuses your sadness with anger. When you're not in a place where you are able to understand that you don't really need so much to find inward contentment. And the world takes advantage of it because all you've been given in terms of religion is just practice and rituals and mechanics. So when the pain sets in, it's how do I find healing through spiritual prescription that's rooted and laden heavily in this tradition. And then it doesn't work when you're trying to figure out, hey, my best friend just died. How does what you tell me about dogs apply to me? Do you get what I'm saying? The sound bites have to get thrown out, and you got to recognize, how do I unlearn some of the things that don't make sense, and how do I actively, regularly learn more so that I have depth of perspective? The guy saw everything that everyone else saw, but he saw it differently. Do you see what I mean? Some of you are going to see women and see them as objects. That's not this kind of vision. That if you're seeing them only about your own personal gratification. Some of you will be in a place where you see yourself as something that necessitates being treated like that. Don't do that, and don't let yourselves let anybody else do that. And you have to be a supporter of your sister, not somebody who's the reason that she has to seek protection from elsewhere. Does that make sense? You start to think about things with paradigm shifts, and you understand your role in it. There's a story of the sheikh that wants to teach his students the difference between people who are people of externals, people of fiqh only, and people of internals, people of the heart. And so he tells his students that when your classmate walks in and gives you salam, don't return the salam. He wants to illustrate the difference. So there's a gathering like this, the classmate walks in, gives salam, assalamu alaikum. In our legal tradition, it's not fard upon you to greet somebody. You're really lucky because a lot of us don't say salams to Muslims when we see them. And if it was fard, then when you didn't do it, every time you didn't do it, it'd be haram. It's a sunnah to greet somebody. But the response to the greeting is a communal obligation, a fard kifaya. So the student comes in and he gives the salam, assalamu alaikum. And nobody says anything because the teacher told them don't respond. A second time, the student gives salam and is met with silence. And then a third time, he conveys the greeting of peace and again has no response. And now he's angry and agitated and says to his classmates, don't you know it's fard upon you to return my greeting? Now the second student comes in and the teacher says, when this classmate comes, do the same thing. Don't return the greeting. And so this student comes and gives salams and nobody responds. And a second time and a third time, just like when the first student came in, it was met again with silence. But this is a student of the internal, the one who understands the synergies of this. Because if you remove any of the dimensions, it takes away depth. It's not that you only have Ihsan, or only Iman, or only Islam. You need all three dimensions to have volume. When this student is met with silence just like his peer, distinct from his peer, rather than getting angry, he says to his classmates, did I do something to offend you that you're not returning my greeting? Do you see the difference? Do you see how it's rooted in what was said before? I can either see myself as the center of everything, or I could see how we all exist in a sphere of influence together. We're going to look at a hadith, Fatu's going to share it with us, that adds to some of this as we close out. We're going to invite you all to attend the programs that we have. Speakers that are called to conferences and communities around the country, they reach out to us to ask if they can come speak here. There's no shortage of events and programs you could attend. Myself, Dr. Ali Murmur, Dr. Marwa Asar, Sheikh Fayaz Jaffer, all going to be having weekly halakas. We have an amazing Sisters halakha that takes place on Fridays. We have other programs that we're going to do, one-on-one opportunities. For a lot of us, we just have to make it a priority, and you're not making the priority being here listening to someone front-facing, but being in gatherings that allow for you to be replenished, to be in a place where you can deepen in aspects of things that most of the world isn't going to teach you about. All they're going to tell you is go out and get yours in terms of what this world is. Making money isn't a problem. There's a lot of rich people who lived during the time of the Prophet. The idea isn't about being adverse to wealth acquisition, but recognizing what our tradition tells us is go out and make money, but be ready to answer the questions that you will be asked about how did you attain it and what did you spend it on. And you want to have a heart that is wakeful, that is mindful of how you attain things and what it is that you spend it on. What I'd love for us to do is if you just turn to the person next to you again, what are you taking away from today's discussion? What are some of the things that are kind of sticking with you? And then we'll come back and discuss really quick, and we'll break for Maghrib, after which we'd love for all of you to join us for dinner. We have some halal Chinese food catered. On Monday nights and Thursday nights, we host iftars here at the Islamic Center. It's a really great way to get into the practice of fasting. I believe tomorrow starts like the middle days of the month also, when the moon is at its fullest. So there's recommended fasts in our tradition. The Prophet ﷺ would recommend to fast
the 3 middle days when the moon is at its largest, the white days, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of the month. Mondays and Thursdays are a recommended fast. There's other things. We try to create these opportunities for everybody, so do come for those. But you can turn to the persons next to you really quick. What are you taking away from today's discussion? And then we'll come back and discuss, and we will then pray Maghrib. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. If you are fasting, Maghrib came in, so you can break your fast if you'd like. Just a couple of quick things before we hear from you all, and then we stand to pray. This is our prayer room. I know for a lot of you it's your first time here. It's open when the building is open. Typically during the week it's open from 8 or 9 in the morning on weekdays till I think 11 at night on weekdays, and on the weekends it's open from like 12 till 10, I believe, during the academic year. We also have a prayer room that's in the basement of the library, Bobst, that's 24 hours a day. At Tandon, at 2 Metro Tech at our engineering school. There's one on the 8th floor. In our dental school, we're building one right now. We also do Jummah here, not in this room, because we get about 800 people for Jummah during the school year. It's going to be on the 5th floor of this building, in the grand hall space at the opposite end of the floor. And then we live stream to all of these rooms down here to just accommodate for overflow. We do something called Fried Chicken Fridays. If you like fried chicken, we have soul food. You like that name? Fried Chicken Fridays? Yeah. Great.
It's a good day.
It's a good day, yeah. MashaAllah. So we have a full soul food lunch. We're doing it this Friday, next Friday, and the Friday after. And then we do it every 2 weeks. We'll see if we do something else on the other weeks. But try to come if you can. And if you're at the engineering school or at the medical corridor, they do Jummah at Tandon and at the dental school as well. This is my son Kareem. You want to say salam to everybody? Yeah, and my daughter Medina is back there. You want to wave to everybody, Medina? Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. We do a lot of gatherings at our apartment also that we'd love to have all of you come and be a part of. Medina and Kareem are really great bakers, mashallah. And they make like crazy things that kids their age should probably not know how to make. Kareem is very well known for his Nutella chocolate chip cookies. They're really good. But in a nutshell, there's a lot of stuff happening here all the time that we'd love for you to make use of. If you're a new student, and you can see some of our welcome team leaders here, so they can scan you in. And Sophia is here too. You want to just raise your hand? Students, yeah. They'll scan you so that we can get your email addresses. And if you're not a student and you're not on any of our mailing lists, just let them know as well. They'll write your email address down so you get notice of all of our events and programs. We have a lot going on all the time. We'd love to see all of you there. So maybe we can hear from a few people before we break. What are some of the takeaways, things that are coming up for people in this discussion? Anyone want to share? Yeah.
I shared a perspective that my teacher emphasized in class. As you said, Islam is not just a set of rules. Rather, we should think about it as a way of our love of Islam, our iman, the extent that we have. That should incline you to want to perform certain acts that are prescribed to you. So rather than seeing it the way that so many of us are taught, we have to flip our understanding and do it out of the muhabba that we have.
Yeah, and we want to get to a place where our love of something is first predicated on the idea of like, what does love even mean? What does healthy love look like? Because a lot of us have been exposed to forms of love that are not healthy. And people who are supposed to care for us or support us and provide love for us use love sometimes as an excuse to not treat us well, you know? And then it influences what our perspectives are of these kinds of things. Do you know what I mean? Other thoughts before we move to pray and have dinner? Any other things? Yeah.
Just to have a deeper understanding of Islam, one thing we talk about in healthcare that's like kind of similar to this is it's called a three-legged stool, right? And that kind of similar to this, but to have all three, Islam, Ihsan, and Iman, to have the stool be able to stand up and have a good foundation using that, rather than just having one leg of the stool where it'll be wobbly.
Yeah, and that's the idea, right? The companions, they didn't know a lot of like abstract things as such, right? You talk about Khalid ibn Walid, whose name is known to people. How much Quran does Khalid ibn Walid have memorized? It's not a lot. Do you get what I mean? It's about being able to take what you know and understand everything else through the prism of those things. How does Surah Fatiha apply in the pursuit of your work, in the pursuit of your studies? You take Surah Ikhlas, and how do you look at it through some of what we just talked about right now? So you're understanding things through multiple vantage points. Do you know what I mean? How does it apply to my relationships, my friendships, my familial kinships, these kinds of things? Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to take a pause here. There's halakas here every night this week around the same time. Dinner will happen on Monday and Wednesday. And on Thursday, for students, we're having a bigger orientation like dinner. It's called Salam NYU, that will go into a deeper dive on the Islamic Center's programs and services. For everybody, our programs tend to be open to everybody, but this is NYU's orientation week, so we have some specific programs that are just for students. Like we had an ice cream social here today. Tomorrow we're doing one at the engineering school. You can come, but you're going to be hanging out with a lot of freshmen who are eating ice cream in the engineering school, so just think about that. And I'm sure they'd love to see you, but some of them might wonder why you're there. Fajr on the Bridge is tomorrow. Also, it's a really great experience if you want to go to pray Fajr on the Bridge. If you haven't, we'll be meeting up in front of the library at I think 4:30 in the morning. Is that correct? 4:30 a.m. They're going to go to the Brooklyn Bridge, walk across, pray Fajr there. There's not a lot of cars at that time, and then watch the sunrise. It's a really beautiful experience, mashallah. So you should try to be there if you can as well. And all of the other orientation programs for those of you who are new students, you can find in the Welcome app. During dinner, after everyone gets seated, just you can line up, you'll get a plate, and just take a seat on the ground. Don't stand with the food, so create bottlenecks. You can try to fill up this side of the room first. We'll let people eat for a bit, and then there's just one or two other announcements and some group activities that we'd like everyone to participate in, inshallah.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.